Welcome, fellow bookworms, to Tippera's Den. My name is Whitney, and today we have my August wrap up. So, August, which is kind of a weird reading month for me. I did get quite a bit read, but I didn't get to everything that was on my TBR. And it just was like one of those months where my reads just kept going on and on. I was not reading as fast as I normally do, and I definitely didn't really push myself, knowing, September I had plans to read a lot of books. So I just kind of went with it. But we do have quite the stack to talk about. So, as always, we'll go over my stats first, then we'll work our way from the ones I didn't get to all the way to my favorite of the month. And we also have a top three that doesn't necessarily correspond to star ratings. So, average pages per day, I had an average of 174.22 pages per day. I did read 13 books in total. My page count was 5,401. My physical reads were 12 books, and I had one digital book. I did not have any audiobooks this month. I read 12 fiction, one nonfiction, and one of the books was a reread. My top moods were adventurous, emotional, and dark. And then genres, again, these overlap, so there's more genres than there are books. But there were 9 that fit the fantasy genre, 4 young adult, 3 LGBTQIA+, 2 magical realism, 2 romance, 2 literary, 1 classic, 1 feminism, 1 thriller, 1 science fiction, 1 science, 1 mystery, 1 horror, 1 history, and 1 historical. And so, yeah, those were all my stats. Page count wise, like I said, I read less books, but I did have around my normal page count. I think I normally average between like 5,000 to 6,000 pages in a month. So I did have some chunky books that helped. Like there were several that was over 400, and I had an almost 1,000-page book. So that definitely helped. I originally started with just 11 prompts, and then I had 7 extras that I added on. And like I said, I got 13 read. So let's go ahead and get into the books themselves. Now, this first one I did add on as an extra. It was for Kim from Expedition Through Pages, their TBR Trail the Quest game. I'm on Team Azray, and that's hosted by Kim and her mom, and then Team Centaurs are by Amy at A-Star Reads and her mom, and it's so much fun. We did actually have the live show yesterday. At the time I'm filming this, and a team did win. So, but this was for this one or that game, and I did not get to it. And that was Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange. One of the prompts was to read an Indigenous author. And yeah, I read There by this author and really enjoyed it overall. I did not love the ending, but I enjoyed it. And so I thought, well, I'll try to get to this one if I have time. And I just didn't have time. So that's going to go back on my shelf. I do like to try to read some Indigenous authors in November, so I might try to get that on to November's TBR. We'll just have to see. The next one was from my game, and I'm not rolling it over or anything like that. And we had gotten Al, which is my relative's memoir. And so that will go back in the honey jar prompt. And I had chosen No Time Like the Future by Michael J. Fox. Like I said, I'm not going to roll this over. This will just go back onto my shelf for another time. I have a lot of memoirs, and I do enjoy reading them here and there, but not high priorities for me. So there's that one. This next one was also for my game, and it worked for, it was for my August Aldea prompt, and Adventures in Aldea, or A Year in Aldea, I've heard it called both, is put on by G at Book Roast, and it kind of goes along with the magical readathon, Aurelium readathon, but it's, all year long. And in August, I needed to read there need to be light in the title, and I also had picked it for the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and that was Church Sanctuary, and that's All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. I am going to try to get this on to my November. My October TBR, I not wanting to add this to that because it is a little bit thicker. But I do want to try to get it on in November. So I am still planning on reading this, but I am gonna put the prompt back in the honey jar because um, I don't want to keep it out, and I'll have to see if it comes back up again in November, or otherwise it'll come up next year. But either way, I'm gonna try to get this one on my November TBR. So there's that one. And then the next two I do want to read in October. The first one was for my unusable disc space, and I had chosen The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher. I was supposed to read this for my family book club. We had the discussion yesterday. I didn't read it. My mom and my sister did. They really enjoyed it, and my niece got halfway through. My other two nieces, they haven't been participating at all, so but I do still want to read this. Both my mom and my sister really enjoyed this, so I do plan on reading it, but I thought it'd be good to roll over into October for spooky season. So there is that one. And then lastly, this was for our character prompt, which we had pulled Eeyore, and that's to read either a literary or dystopian book. And this is another one for Aldia. I think this one's been since May, I want to say. And it was to read a dystopian, and so that was Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. And this one is another one I would like to read in October, but this one's going to be kind of low priority. I kind of decided the Aldia books, if I don't get to the rest of them, I'm over it. But I do still really want to read this one, so it will go on to like the very lowest priority in October, but if I do have time, I would like to still read it in October. So those are all the books I did not get to. I did not have any DNFs, which for my purposes, DNFs go in the 1-star rating. I tend not to rate them on Goodreads or Storygraph, but for my journal and my purposes, they're 1 stars because I couldn't even get through them. And I didn't have any DNFs, so that was really, really good. I did, however, have 2 stars. So the first one up was for this was Jack and the Beanstalk, and it was poverty of some sort. And for this one, I had chosen The Antidote by Karen Russell. This is during the like the Dust Bowl. It's kind of booked in by 2 weather events. You have the Dust Bowl on one end, and Black Sunday, which was a big dust storm during that Dust Bowl. And then on the other end, there was like a big flood. They got 24 inches of rain in 24 hours, and it flooded the Republican River. And this one I was highly anticipating. I did win this as a Goodreads giveaway back, I think, again in May. And I was so excited about this one. Reading the synopsis and everything, I thought I would really love this. And it just was obviously a big letdown. I ended up only giving it 2 stars, and it's the lowest rated of the month. So in this one, you're basically following a bunch of different point of views. You first have the Antidote, and when she was 15, she was in a school for unwed mothers, and that was a real school. So there are a lot of historical components. The weather storms were real. There's 2 different schools, a school where they would send the Native American children, so an Indian school, and then the unwed mother school. Those were real, and then some of the characters were based on real characters. So the Antidote, when she was 15, she went to the school for unwed mothers. And she gave birth, and she wanted to keep her baby, and they basically told her baby dies, but she knows like they stole her child because she knew it was alive when it was born, and like she nursed it and everything else. And like then they later she like fell asleep, and then they came back and told her that her child had died, and she's like, no, he didn't. So that's kind of the premise for these women who are called vaults, and like they all have different names, and so she's the Antidote. And basically they all have like big tragedy in their lives that like leaves a hole inside them, and then they're able to take memories from people. So any memories, like unpleasant memories or like things that are just weighing you down, you can deposit it into a vault, and then if you choose, like you don't remember them, you don't have the memory anymore, but you know you went to the vault and you have like a deposit slip, and so you can go and pull it out at a later date if you want to. And so she's a vault, and so we're following her point of view. Then you have Harp Olecki, who is a Polish farmer, and like there's this community was basically a group of refugees from Poland. Um, and then they started this community and they all have their farms and such. So you're following his point of view, and he's the only one after the Black Sunday Dust Bowl. He's the only one, or the Black Sunday Dust Bowl, the dust storm, like the whole time period was the Dust Bowl, but the Black Sunday dust storm, his farm was unaffected. Like his farm's like protected somehow, where all his neighbors, their farms are like decimated and everything else. And so he doesn't really know why his farm is being protected. Then you have his niece, Dell, and her mother was murdered, and so she's now living with her uncle, and she plays basketball, and like she's very committed to it. She's always out practicing in the dust storms and whatnot. And then they have like two games left, and they're trying to become the Region 7 champions. Then you have the Scarecrow point of view, and then at the very end you have this cat's point of view. And this book just tried to do too much, and I did kind of skim, like it has like a historical note and then an author's note, and it talks about like amnesia, settler amnesia, and like the Native Americans being forced from their land and such. And so that's what I was expecting going in, and you really don't get that. And she tried to do too much, this author did. And so you have like these women being murdered, only one of which is an actual Native American woman. I think if she had tied in that Native American thread, it could have worked, but only one of the women is a Native American woman. There is another woman of color, I think she's like Spanish, but only one of the women is actually Native American. Oh, and I forgot, you also have a photographer who has this camera that is a time traveling camera, so it shows both the past and the future of whatever. Like it just depends on what the camera feels like. Forgot about that point of view. So anyway, so there's these murders, and there's this corrupt sheriff that is using the antidote to kind of erase people's memories of the corrupt things he does. And so you have that, and it really doesn't tie into the rest of the story very well. And like I said, I thought the focus was going to be more on like the Native American lands getting taken and such. And it's not. And so you have that, and then you're following the niece with her basketball, which really doesn't add to the story either. And then this farmer with his weird, farm being protected, which does tie in at the end. But it's just a lot going on, and in the end, nothing really gets wrapped up. And the photographer, I think, again, like I like the Antidote's point of view. I do think the farmer's point of view worked as well. Not his niece, but his point of view worked as well. And like at one point he retrieves his father's memories, and that really ties into the occupation of the Native American lands and such, because the refugees from Poland came and like the government gave him this land and such. And so he's basically realizing, like, I'm doing the same thing that the Germans were doing to us Polish people, I'm now doing to the Native Americans, and that's why he kind of deposits this memory. And so that was really cool. And the whole concept of like, yeah, you don't want to remember because it's unpleasant, and so you deposit it, like your actions. And like, yeah, he's not like taking these lands to be malicious or anything, but the government's kind of using these other people to push the Native Americans out and such. And so I like that. And then you have the photographer, and she's taking pictures. It's like the New Deal, and I don't remember what it's called, but it's like RA. And so she's taking pictures to like show like these communities and such. And her camera can take, when she takes pictures, sometimes they develop and they show an image from the past. Sometimes they develop and show an image from the future. And again, I think if she had just focused on the past and like the Native American aspect, it would have worked. But like the future, like them showing the future, and it didn't make any sense. Like it had no bearing on the story at all, or the ending or anything like that. So that was frustrating. And then the Scarecrow was just random. It does tie in the end, but I didn't like how it tied in at the end, and I just didn't enjoy that. And it was just, again, unnecessary. The whole basketball and the niece was unnecessary, and then this random cat point of view thrown in at the end was unnecessary. And the end itself really dropped it down for me because, like I said, nothing gets wrapped up. It's just kind of a lot of hectic drama, and then nothing gets resolved. And the only reason it ends is because all of a sudden they get all this rain. Like, I'm like, okay. And so, yeah, it was just really frustrating. It lacked focus. There was too much going on. And it wasn't what I expected. I thought I was going to be focusing on, like I said, the amnesia, the settler amnesia, and the land, and how it was taken from the Native Americans and such. And it just wasn't. So there is that one. It only got 2 stars from me. The next one that only got 2 stars is kind of a shame because I did like the story itself. And this one was for what's her name? Alice in Wonderland, and it's alternate reality. And so this one, I pulled Nosferatu by Joe Hill. I think I was supposed to read this in July, and then when I was doing my August TBR, I was like, any books I can pull off because I had a bunch of rollovers and such, kind of still trailing from May. So I was like, any books I can pull from that TBR, I'm gonna put onto August, and this was one of them because it really worked for the alternate reality prompt. So this is Nosferatu by Joe Hill, and this one, like I said, I really enjoyed the story itself. It was the writing. One, pop culture references incessant throughout this. The Christmas ones, those worked because basically the premise of this is you have Charlie Manx and he takes these children to Christmas Land, which is an alternate reality. And he takes them and he's basically kind of feeding off them for his longevity. And so he takes them to Christmas Land. And then you have Victoria McQueen, I want to say is her last name. And she has this bike that she's able to ride and find lost things. And so when she's riding this bike and she's thinking about lost things, she goes over this bridge and then takes her to wherever she needs to go, and she finds what she needs to find. And she encounters Manx, and he ends up going to prison. Like, obviously she can't tell the whole truth of who he is. And like, she can't really explain how she ended up from her home all the way into Colorado. Like, she lives on the East Coast and then she's all the way into Colorado. And so she basically just says he kidnapped her. And like, there was a kid and they never found the kid. And she's like, he's kidnapped other kids and such. And so, yeah, it does end up going to prison, and he's kind of like in a coma in prison. And then many years pass, and now she's a mother and she's still struggling, you know, from the trauma of Manx and everything. And I really liked her because when she's older, like when she's younger, yeah, she truly believes that this bridge is there and such. But when she's older and after the whole Manx things, it's like, you know, like she ends up getting a mental hospital because she starts thinking she's getting calls from these children from Christmas Land. And nobody else hears the phones. And so she ends up burning down their house and such. And so she ends up in a mental hospital. And it's really interesting because, like, she doesn't know, is this in my mind, or like, is this a real thing? Like, can I really ride a bike over this bridge and such? And so Charlie Manx ends up coming back and taking her son. So she has to get her son, but of course nobody believes her because they think Charlie Manx died in prison. And so I really like the story itself, but again, the pop culture reference were incessant, and the kind of unnecessary crudeness at points. Like, there were points where it really didn't need to be that crude, and it was just done, I guess, for the effect, which I didn't appreciate. And then also, like, and that goes on, ties into Charlie Manx because he's very like old fashioned as far as like his views, and like Victoria has tattoos and she's an unwed mother, and so he kind of looks down like that. But then the way he says things and such is crude, and it's like that doesn't make sense for a very old fashioned type of guy. And so I didn't like that. And Victoria's baby daddy is a big man. Like, he's overweight, he's obese, and every time he's in a scene, his weight is referenced. And he uses terms like, his man titties, and his boxers were as big as a pillowcase and things like that. And it was just, again, like, derogatory towards weight, which I didn't like. And it was just incessant, like every time. A weight is not a personality trait. Like, a weight of a person doesn't make that person's personality. And it was just so frustrating and so derogatory. And that really dropped it down for me. And then also, like, Charlie Minx would say like very childish things. And there is another character that is like Minx's sidekick basically, and he does, like, he is intellectually disabled, and you can tell that. And so, like, when he says stuff or makes childish things, like, that makes sense for that character. For Minx, it doesn't. He's like, I'm not a kitty fiddler, and do you need to go winky wee, and things like that. And it's just like, it's just, again, just unnecessary. And it didn't really fit with that character. And so, yeah, while I like the story, the writing, I did not appreciate, and I'm probably never going to pick up another book by this author, if I'm being honest, as much as I enjoyed the story. So, one thing that Joe Hill did do that was really cool in this book is, like, you would get to the end of that chapter, and the sentence would cut off, and the chapter header for the next chapter would finish that sentence, which that was really interesting, and I really did like that. Next, we had a digital book, and this was just an extra. I did play Winnie the Pooh Bingo, which I'll link that video down below, but I got to read an audio or a digital book, and I could have done this book for either or. I did read it digitally though, and that was Love and Other Killers by Brynne Weaver. This is just a little novella that goes along with the Ruinous Love trilogy. And I seen it, and I had gotten it, and I was holding off in case I got that spot on my Winnie the Pooh bingo game. And so when it came up, it was perfect because the audio is like an hour and 16 minutes. It's only 50 pages on the digital ebook. And so I did end up reading it digitally. I originally planned on listening to it, but that didn't work. So in this one, you basically have all three couples from the Ruinous Love trilogy, and they're back. And in the first book of that trilogy, you have Rowan and Sloane, and they have their competition where each year they go and they try to off somebody, because the whole Ruinous Love trilogy, they're all serial killers, but they kill bad guys, basically, like people that are not good. And so in this one, they're all meeting up for the competition, and it's girls against guys. It was just a little too short for me. It was only 50 pages. You didn't really get, like, the first part, like, it was just kind of them meeting up as, like, the night before, and them meeting up and drinking and such. And wish they had spent more time, like, giving us a backstory, the author had, during that part, the backstory on their target, because we don't get a whole lot of that. And then when they do get to their target, it's just really fast. And so either a little bit of length or a little bit time spent on giving us information on the target, or both, because I just didn't really care. I mean, you didn't really need a lot of time with the characters because you already know them from the original trilogy. But yeah, it was just a little bit too fast. Like, the action part of the story was a little bit too fast and lackluster. And like I said, that build up time I wish had been spent giving us a little bit more information. But it was funny. References to things from the actual trilogy and little, like, inside jokes between these couples and such were really enjoyable. I did laugh a couple times. And so yeah, it was fun, but it's just a little novella, and it's never gonna get a big rating, especially because, like I said, it just didn't have enough for me. And even being that short, like, she could have developed it a little bit more, or added a little length, and it was still been novella size. So then we have the next one was an extra. I just wanted to read. It's part of a series. It's the second in the series, and I wanted to read them both back to back. And it also worked for Kim's game because we had to read a series start to finish, and duologies did count for that, and this is a duology. So this is the second book, and it's Our Deadly Designs by Kalyn Josephson. I love the first book, and we'll talk about it here in a moment. And so that was a reread for me, the first book was, and I was really excited to finally get to this one because I had kind of forgotten about it. And so I was very excited to finally get to this one, and it just was really frustrating. The pacing didn't quite work for me. Basically, I can't give you a whole lot on this one without spoiling it, but you're following the aftermath of book one. In book one, the main focus is like this big horse race, and there's a lot of political things that go on because there's like these political families, there's like this war that's going on, and you have refugees and whatnot. And so, this one is following that, and it's more of the political aspect. But our core group in this one is very fractured. They're keeping secrets from each other. They're just very fractured, and that really didn't work for me. And you also have the added viewpoint of Damien, which in the first book, it's just the two girls, Ariel and Makira, whose viewpoints we're following, and we're swapping back and forth between them. Where this one, we have those two and Damien. And there's also Reed, who's part of the core group. And it's like, if you're going to add Damien, I think she should have added Reed in as well, because I really like Reed. But at the same time, like, the pacing didn't work. I think she should have just left it to the two girls. And if the group had been more cohesive, those two viewpoints would have been fine. And it also detracted from like the main plot point of like the political stuff and whatnot because of all the issues within the main group. And so that's what really dropped it down for me. I still really enjoyed being with these characters. You don't get as much of the horse aspect in this one. They're definitely still there, but I mean, the main focus of the first one is that horse race, where that's not the main focus here. So the animals are just kind of more to the side. But I still enjoyed it overall. It didn't work for me like the first one did. So that got 3 stars. Then let's see here. Then we had 3 4 stars. In the bottom of that list, he was The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And this one was, again, another extra for Kim's game. We had gotten the potion bottle, so we needed a book with potions or poisons or alchemy or something of the sort. And so this one was perfect for that. It's nice and short. And I had it on a TBR previously, and I didn't get to it. And so I read this one, and overall I really did enjoy it. The thing with this one is you have like what's Santiago, I think is his name, and he's just kind of referred to as a boy. And he's a shepherd, and he wants to go to Egypt and see the pyramids, and he kind of comes across this old lady that gives him like a prophecy, and it's like, go to the pyramids and give me like a 10% of your gold or something like that. And so it's kind of this look at like following your dreams, whether like if you're comfortable, because he was comfortable as a shepherd, like he enjoyed being a shepherd and getting to take his flock around and see different areas because he had always wanted to travel. And yeah, it was kind of limited in his travel because just being a shepherd. But so he ends up selling his flock and going on this adventure to go to Egypt and see the pyramids. And then along the way, he like meets this old man who talks about what is it called? Like finding your basically finding your he says it in a very distinct way, but basically finding your happiness and your purpose and such in life. And a lot of people lose that as they get older, like they have it in childhood and then they kind of lose that. And so he goes, and then he meets this alchemist. Like he pairs up with this other scholarly guy who wants to meet the alchemist. And when they get to like this oasis in the desert where the alchemist is, he ends up catching Santiago ends up catching the attention of the alchemist. And there's like tribal wars and such. And so yeah, he goes on this adventure, and it's kind of just this look at like an existential look at what happiness is, and do you need to go and search for your happiness, or is it okay to be content with what you have, and kind of the look at that. The thing with this one is when they get to the oasis, like he meets this woman, or this girl, and like in the beginning, like his whole goal is to get to this little town, like get his sheep there, because last year when he was there, he met the merchant's daughter and he fell in love with her. He doesn't even know her name. Like, you love her, but you don't even know your name. And so that whole love component, that's what dropped it down for me. It was like, you love her and you don't even know her name. And then he gets to this oasis and he meets this other girl and he completely forgets about the merchant's daughter. Like, oh, like you're yesterday's news. Like, now I'm so in love with this other girl. And again, it's like love at first sight. And like the whole, and I get like part of it might be cultural and then like time period and such, but the whole personality of these women were sitting and waiting to be married. Like, that was their whole personality. Like, yeah, you go and follow your dreams and I'll be right here waiting for you. And my whole purpose is just to wait for you and get married to you. And it's like, no. So that's what dropped it down for me. But otherwise, like, I kind of like that look at like, what it means to be happy, and like, if you're content, do you really need to search for more? Or like, should you follow your dreams and should you push yourself, like kind of that conversation. I did actually really enjoy that. So that was my one lowest 4-star. Then we have the next two are actually kind of very similar, I think, as far as vibes go. And so first we have Voyage of the Damned by Frances White. This was another extra book. My husband was able to pick any book in my Winnie the Pooh hunting game, and he had encouraged me to pick this one up at the store. And so he wanted me to read it. And so this one, I didn't realize, like, I mean, I knew there was like a murder mystery based on the fact. I didn't realize like that was more of the main genre, like that closed circle murder mystery, than the fantasy aspect. But basically you have these 12 like basic kingdoms, and there's a hierarchy. You have the dragon and then like a bunch of different, and they all have like their little, you know like he's a fish. So they all have their different animal, like, um mascots kind of, but it's a little bit more than that, and they have like powers that kind of go along with them. And basically there was this goddess, and I don't remember why she had to get rid of her powers, but she had to get rid of her powers, and the dragon was like, I'll take, the powers. But he wasn't strong enough, or they weren't strong enough, and so they ended up trickling down. And originally there were 13, but the crabs didn't want to follow the rules of the whole. And so they kind of like, especially you have like the uppers and then the lowers, and the crabs kind of revolted. And so now there's this wall, and they have to protect the wall and keep the crabs out. Um, and so when the next generation basically gets their powers, they go on this voyage together, and they go to where the goddess originally bestowed the powers upon them, and yada, yada, yada. So there's that, but somebody gets murdered, and Ganymedes, who is our main character, is like trying to basically figure out who's murdering the other people and what's going on and whatnot. And he's kind of a joke as far as like they go. Like, he's the lowest of the low. And none of the others really like him, and so he's just kind of a class clown, makes jokes and such. And he doesn't actually have powers, and so he kind of has to fake that, and that you learn right away. And so he never got his blessing, and so he kind of has to fake it, but then he has to learn about like who's killing the others and try to get them all safely to this mountain. And it was fine. Like I said, that's not quite my thing. It read really young in one aspect as far as like the simplicity and such, but it also had like very spicy innuendos, and then you had the murders, and it kind of got a little dark at points. And so it's kind of, I would say, more new adult, because there's not like actual spicy scenes or such, but it also reads younger too. So it's kind of in this weird zone. But it was fun. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, the closed circle murder mysteries are typically my thing. But I had fun with it for sure. And I really like there's age ranges, so you have the youngest, Blessed, and she's like 6, and her name's Grasshopper. Well, that's not her name, but they call her Grasshopper. That's like her, animal or whatever. And so Ganymede's, kind of takes her under his wing and such. So it was fun. I did have a good time, but it wasn't anything like amazing or anything. And I really don't like closed circle murder mysteries, but I did have a good time overall with this. And I think the author did a good job where you don't really know who it is. Like there's enough suspicion on everybody that you don't really know who it is. So, but yeah, that was that one. Then our next one was my last book of August, and that was the Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. This again was an extra one for Kim's game, but I did not finish it in time. But we needed to read a book that had patina green on it. And my husband picked this. He got another pick, but he had to pick off my TBR. And so he liked the colors of this one, so he picked it. And so, yeah, this one has trans and other LGBTQIA plus rep, which is really good. And I like the cultural aspect of this. And so basically we're following Tio, and you have again the different like gods, and they're all semi-deosis. And so again you have like the uppers and the lowers. So you have the golds who are the uppers, and then you have the jades who are the lowers. And the golds go to this academy and they train, and they're like the heroes of the world, and they save the people. Like when things happen, they're the ones that come in and save the people and such. And when like they originally, I think Sol and Tierra created first the gold, and that wasn't quite working. So then they created the jades, and that wasn't quite working, and they created the obsidians, and the obsidians were like evil and turned evil and such. And then they created the people, like human people, and that worked for them. Well, the obsidians, they end up, Sol had to sacrifice his life to trap the obsidians up in the sky. And so every 10 years there's Sunbearer trials, and normally it's 10 golds who are chosen to compete in the trials. One becomes Sunbearer, and whoever loses becomes the sacrifice. And the Sunbearer has to sacrifice whoever loses in order to refresh the sunstones, which now that Sol's gone, is what's keeping the obsidians trapped. And so the Sunbearer sacrifices, gets the energy that they need, and then they go replenish the sunstones, and they last another 10 years. Well, this year, and there has been jades chosen in the past, but it's very rare. And this year, Tio and one other jade gets chosen. And so there's 5 trials, and so they go to different kingdoms to compete in these 5 different trials. And the thing with this one is the trials, especially the first 3, weren't very well developed. They were kind of lackluster, like they were super quick. More time was spent in between the trials, and like I was expecting it to be a little bit more high stakes, and it just kind of wasn't. It was kind of silly, like yeah, they were trying to hurt each other, but it didn't feel very high stakes or serious. And then the last 2 trials were a lot better. There was a little bit more development, more time spent on those trials, and I did enjoy that. I will say the 5th trial, though, there were a lot of errors, and it needed to be edited better, because there was one character. So some of the characters, had alliances and whatnot. And most of them did. Like, they had different alliances. And there's 2 characters, and in the 5th trial, they end up together, and our main character, Tio, sees them together, and they're going off, and they have to get to the end spot, right? And so then we shoot forward, and Tio sees the end spot, and it's just the one character there. And I'm like, well, where's the other character? And after that point, when those 2 characters, like, team up and get together, the one character just gets forgotten, because at the end, when everything happens as well, not a mention of that character. I'm just like, okay, like, you kind of forgot a character there. And so yeah, it's like, where's that character? And then the character who was at the end spot is then later on said that they were one of the characters that didn't complete the trial, And I'm like, yeah, they did. They were there. And so that was like very big, like in my mind. Like it's like, hello, like you had those characters together, and then like you completely don't mention the other character from then on out. And then where you mention every other character because there's 10 of them, and I'm like, you mentioned every other, single other one other than the one. Like, why did you all of a sudden forget him? And then to say like you see that he has completed the trial, and then all of a sudden the author's saying he didn't complete the trial, and I think he just got mixed up with the characters. But again, editing, like that should have been caught. Like it was very obvious, like that mistake. And then also Aiden, one of his allies, she's like right there with him, and then all of a sudden she's not there, and I'm like, well, where is she? Like, why isn't she helping in the situation? And then all of a sudden she's there again. And I'm just like little things like that, like the characters just got forgotten. And so yeah, just kind of the lacklusterness of the original trials and then the mistakes in that fifth trial dropped it down for me. But I am definitely interested in picking up the second one. I think where it ended is set up for the second one really well. And so I'm excited to read that at some point next year, probably, and see where the story goes. So there's that one. And then we did have 6 5 stars. So definitely had the good chunk of 5 stars. The first one was for my genre-a-thon, and that was Women in Science, 50 Fearless Pioneers Who Changed the World, written and illustrated by Rachel Ignotofsky. And this one is just covering like from the 1800s basically to, I think this was published 2016, I want to say, women in STEM and different STEM fields and kind of what they did there. And so it was a lot of fun. It has really fun illustrations and like color schemes, which I really like. And it's just like you have that, and there's like little just snippets of information about them, and then you have more snippets on the side over here, and just a little, one page about whoever that is. And it was just really fun. It's not like very in depth, but it's a great starting point. Like there was some I didn't know about, and there was one that stood out, and it was Katia Kraft, and she was a volcanologist, which I thought was really cool because that was a little different. Because a lot of them are in very similar fields, but she stood out to me because she was the only one that studied volcanoes, and I thought that was cool. Even though her and her husband did die tragically studying a volcano. But yeah, it was really interesting, and it's a great starting point. Like this would be great for kids, and a great starting point for them to learn about these women, and then maybe do further research on the ones they're interested in. And I love the illustrations, and like I said, it was informative without bogging it down, and a great starting point just to get you familiar with these different women that you might not have heard of or know about. And then you can do your further research on your own. And I will say, I thought it had good diversity. Like in the beginning, most of the women are white, but you gotta look at like in early on, like women in general in science were gonna have a hard time, let alone if they were a woman of color. But definitely later on, she includes a lot more diversity as far as like the different women and women of color and such. So that was really good as well. There's that one. Then we had, this one was for Aladdin, and it was Magic Carpet. And for that one, I chosen Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. This is the second book in the Six of Crows series, the fifth book in the Grishaverse. So I really enjoyed this one. Probably not as much as the first one, I would say, but I still really enjoyed it. So in the first one, there's this big heist job that they take on. And so this one, it's following that job, and there's still that heist aspect. They're just smaller jobs, and they're basically trying to kind of get their city in order, essentially. And so yeah, you're just following these group of 6 characters. And 2 of them are Grisha, which is fun, and there's this drug that are affecting the Grisha, That is kind of the main point of both books, is to try to keep this drug out of the wrong hands and whatnot. And so they're each kind of doing their thing, trying to fix things and whatnot. And then the end is kind of a little bittersweet because they do kind of all go in their different directions a little bit. But I really enjoyed this overall, and I like that it still had that heist aspect, just in kind of a different form. So there's that one. Then we have, this one was for Gopher, and it was Whistles and Wheezes, so it needed to have an alliteration. And so I chose This Dark Descent by Kalyn Josephson. So this is the first book. And like I said, this one, it's following these four characters and Makira, in order to save her father's ranch where they breed enchanted horses. Basically is kind of forced to enter this horse race called the Illinaire, which is very deadly. And so she enters this race, and then Damien, who is one of the lesser houses, like a lord of the lesser house. Well, he's not the lord because they each have to do different trials as well in order to become like the lord of the house. The siblings do. And so he's not lord yet, but he basically has his own agenda, and so he wants to help Makira win. And then you have his friend Reed, who is very like more like scientific and likes to like study stuff and whatnot. And then you have Ariel, who creates golems, which is really cool. And so she kind of has a different kind of magic that is banned in this kingdom. And so yeah, and there was like this big event which ties into both stories, where she was originally from got destroyed. And then like so there's kind of this war with other kingdoms, because there's this like drug called Verillion, and so there's this war with other kingdoms because they want that resource essentially. And so yeah, they're all working together. They all have their different agendas and whatnot, to try to win this race, which is very deadly, and whatnot. But I really enjoyed this one. I like the golem aspect. It does have Jewish folklore, which I'm not entirely familiar with. But I did like the golems, and I really liked the horse racing aspect and whatnot. So this was a lot of fun, and it was a reread for me. This was originally a gift from Marianna, which I was so appreciative when I received it, and I was happy to be able to reread it again. And then dive into the second one. So this one's 5 stars, the other one's a 3-star, but I still really enjoyed these characters and this world. So there's that one. Next, we have, this one was just a free choice. And for that, I had chosen, I originally had a different book on here. I was going to read the third book in the Prison Healer series by Lynette Noni, but I read the second book in July, and I could not wait to read the third book, so I ended up reading the third book in July as well. And so I slotted this one in for that free choice, and that's Slaying the Vampire Conqueror by Carissa Broadbent. This is the last book I need to read before the new book came out, the beginning of August, which is the Fallen in the Kiss of Dusk, which I'm going to be reading in September. I'm so excited about. Everything I've read by Carissa Broadbent has been 5 stars for me. I absolutely love their writing. This one is probably among my favorites, though. My favorite is the War of Lost Hearts trilogy. But I think these two are some of my favorite characters, even over Max and Tasana. I really enjoy these. So basically, you have Selena, and she's a member of the Arakessin, which worship. There's a lot of different gods in this world, and she worships this one god. And in order to serve that god, she lost her eyesight. And then she also lost a finger or whatnot. Like, you have to sacrifice parts of yourself to serve this god. And so they don't have eyesight, and they see through like threads, which is really interesting. And so the Arakessin like are kind of trying to take down some of the warlords and such that are ruling this kingdom. And we learned that Selena, when she was 10, like, she joined the Arakessin a little later than they prefer to take children because of a tragedy that happened in her city or whatnot. And so she joins the Erekessin, and they're basically kind of like spies and assassins and whatnot. And then this vampire Conqueror comes to their shores. And so she's tasked with infiltrating his army and getting close to him, and trying to learn like what his goal is and whatnot. And then once she's earned his trust, to kill him. But of course, it's fantasy romance, so she does end up falling in love and whatnot. But I really like these characters, especially Atreus, who's the vampire conqueror, because he's kind of stoic and walled off and tough. But then he has like this tortured soft boy soul, and so I really like that. And I liked him and Selena together. I really enjoyed them together. And they're going to these different kingdoms, and they're having to battle these different warlords and whatnot. But I loved it, and I really liked how you kind of see how the different books are going to tie together. I think in the third duology, because the Crowns of Nyaxia series, it's a set of 3 duologies, and then you have 2 so far. I don't know if there's going to be another like little book in the middle. So you had a novella, and then you had this one that was set in that same world. And so yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I think I see, and I don't know, like maybe it'll start to come together in The Fallen and the Kiss of Dusk. It might start to come together, or it will come together in that third duology. We'll have to see. But you kind of see where all these different characters are going to start tying together and like whatnot. So I'm excited about that. Like the underlying plot, I think you got a little bit more of it here. So there's that one. Next, we have my almost 1,000-page book, and this one we got in Hercules. It was No Damsel in Distress. And so for that, I had chosen Kingdom of Ass by Sarah J. Maas. This is the final book in the Throne of Glass series. It's 980 pages, this chunky book. And yeah, I really liked how she finished it up. I wish the epilogue, like, it's still obviously 5 stars, but I do wish the epilogue, she mainly focuses on the main characters throughout the series, and I do wish she had shown us what some of the other characters, like their aftermath, looked like, because we don't really get that, where I wish we had. So I wish a little bit more time had been spent on the epilogue and not just on the one character. But this is wrapping up the series. So basically the series, I can't tell you specifically about this one, but you have Selena, and in the beginning she's in prison, and she gets pulled out to compete to become the king's assassin, and the prince is the one who pulls her out. So you have the prince, her, and the king's captain of the guard, who's kind of tasked with watching over her, make sure she doesn't do anything. And so yeah, the first book she's competing in that to become the king's assassin, but then it just takes off from there, and the journey you go on is crazy. Like from where you're at the beginning to where you're at here is crazy. I loved how, because like I read the little prequel novellas first, and how she tied in characters from way back then, and in the beginning of the story and such, how she tied them in to the end. Like I had completely forgotten about some of these characters, and I thought that was really well done. And still balancing like the new characters in this one, like you're going back and forth between different point of views, but you never lose pacing or anything like that. Like it really keeps up, and it paints the full picture of what you need to know, because the characters are all in different areas doing different tasks. Because the overall plot of this series in a whole is, you have these kingdoms, but there's something dark kind of rising, and they're having to try to figure out what this darkness is and stop it, essentially. But yeah, I love this so much. I'm kind of sad it's over, but also kind of relieved as well, because it was very stressful for me at times. So I really enjoyed this, and I'm glad. I had originally read ACOTAR, and I did not like it, and then I was like, okay, I'm not gonna read anything else by that author. Like I don't care. And then I found the little prequel novellas at a thrift store. And I thought, well, maybe I'll give her another chance. This is a different series. Like, maybe I'll give her a chance. I'm so glad I did, because I ate this up. So there is that one. And then lastly was just an extra book. And I am so glad kind of picked this up on a whim, because I thought it would be a good book for my husband and I to read together. And that's Dungeon Crawler Carl by Dinniman. We've already got the rest of the series lined up, everything to date. The 7th book that in these editions comes out September 23rd. And so I already have that pre-ordered. We got the other ones, and we're planning on reading book 2 in October, just because my September is busy. But I'm kind of sad about that, because I just want to jump back into this world. It's so much fun. So basically in this world, you have, like, the world collapses, and anybody who was inside when it collapsed dies. But if you're outside, you're saved. And you have, like, so much time to get to these staircases, which take you down into a dungeon. And the dungeon is like a video game show for aliens. so you have Carl and his ex's cat, who he was watching while his ex was on vacation with the guy she cheated on him with. He's watching her cat, and the cat gets out. Like, the one time the cat gets out, and he's out, and he has no pants. He just has a jacket, no pants, and he goes out to save this cat, and the world collapses. And so the whole no pants thing is a big thing throughout. The cat is a big thing throughout Princess Donut. So funny. Like, I don't think I've laughed so much in a book in a long time. And I'm not a big humor person. Like, most things I don't find funny. This one was so hilarious. This one is full of pop culture references, but it works. That's the whole point of the story. It works for this. I like the gaming aspect. Like, I'm not a huge gamer. I do play World of Warcraft with my husband. But past that, so I know some of the terms and whatnot, but not all of them, and he fills in the blanks. But even if you're not a gamer and you're not reading it with somebody who is, like, you don't need to know. Like, yes, you might miss a few things here and there, but you'll get the gist of the story anyway. And it is hilarious. I love this so much. Like, and my husband and I have different tastes, so us, both just having a grand time with this. Like, it's excellent. I love this. I'm so glad I did pick it up. And I've, seen people talking about it, and this is worth the hype. Like, it's so much fun. And so, yeah, my husband and I read this out loud together and had a blast doing so. So this is top book of the month. So those are all the books I've read. Now, we do have our top 3 as well. And again, this doesn't necessarily correspond with star rating, but in the top spot for both, Dungeon Crawler Carl, it is number 1 as far as top 3. It's going to stick with me. Like, the imagery was so vivid. Like, you were really going along with Carl as he's going through this dungeon, battling different things. There's, the pop culture references, which I normally hate, I loved in this book. Like, it worked for the story. Like, it's kind of the point of the story. It's a whole one big pop culture reference. And the different stereotypes. Like, you have a Karen. You have, like, these bad llamas, which are, like, drug dealers and such. Like, the stereotypes are kind of funny. You have this hoarder. Like, it's funny. And so I like the humor. I really liked the stereotypes and the pop culture references. Princess Donut, that cat, like, she is such a cat, and she's awesome. I love Princess Donut. And then also just the gaming element, like, the premise of it is a lot of fun. Like, the gaming element, the reality show element, like, that's a lot of fun. So that's why it's number 1. Then we actually have Nosferatu, which was one of my 2 stars. Actually, both 2 stars end up in the top 3. Just because, like I said, they're gonna stick with me. So yeah, I might not have enjoyed them as much. Like, Carl, I enjoyed. But the other 2, yeah, I might not have enjoyed them as much. I had problems with the writing. And so they were 2 stars for me, but they're gonna stick with me. And so number 2 spot goes to Nosferatu by Joe Hill. And I really like that alternate reality and the way it was done, because it was kind of interesting, because it was in their head, and they were calling it like an inscape. And so just kind of the way it was done was really interesting. I like the psychological aspect, especially with Victoria, whether like, am I, crazy? Like, did I make that up or is it real? I really like that. They're creepy kids. Like, the kids are creepy, and I kind of like that. And then the way the chapter endings ended and then the beginning of the next chapter finished that sentence, I really enjoyed that. I thought that was very unique. And then the third place does go to the Antidote. Like I said, it wasn't quite what I was expecting. It did lack focus and had too many characters, point of views, but I really liked the historical weather events and how she kind of booked the story with both of those. I thought the vaults were very interesting. Like, the way she did that and the way they had that room in them, and they could take the unpleasant memories for other people. I thought that was interesting. I like the concept of the camera. Like I said, if she had focused on it just being where when she developed it would have been the past and not the future, I think it would have worked a lot better. But I like the concept of it capturing images from the past. I really like that. And then the examples of, well, it's better them than me, and so, like, yeah, like, I feel bad and whatnot, but it's better that it happens to them and not me. There was different examples of that throughout the book, and then kind of like using the vaults to like relieve yourself of that burden, like knowing that, yeah, you sacrifice somebody else for your own comfort. So there is that as well, which I thought was really good. But those are the 13 books I read. I would love to know if you've read any of these books, if you're interested in reading any of these books now that I've talked about them. I would love to know maybe your favorite book from the month of August. You can leave that down in the comments below. Just want to let me know you're here and you're helping to support the channel by commenting. You can always leave a rabbit or any type of animal emoji. I really appreciate when you guys do that because it does help out the channel. So I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.